he's got the stinky, lazy-eyed meanie. And welcome to Rubber Chicken with a podcast in the middle. A podcast all about the Monkey Island series of adventure games. This time we're going to discuss a few more recent interviews with Ron Gilbert and Dave Grossman, and then get into our first instalment of Madly Rotating Buccaneer, in which we look at Tales of Monkey Island, Chapter 3, Lair of the Leviathan. After which we shall spin the Buccaneer once again.
Well, gee, I feel a little guilty now.
Okay, you want to talk about Monkey Island?
I do want to talk about Monkey Island.
Let's talk about Monkey
Do
Island.
you want to talk about Monkey Island?
I only ever want to talk about Monkey Island.
That checks out.
So there's been a little bit of news. When I say news, there have been some new articles. CNET. What's the other one? VentureBeat?
CNET, VentureBeat, and our very own Sydney Morning Herald.
Yeah, Fairfax at its finest.
Australia.
Yes, as we are Australian, as you can tell by our beautiful cosmopolitan accents.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first article CNET posted is rather slight. Is there anything to take away from that? It's just is it an interview or just a few quotes, some grabs from Ron, I think?
Yeah, it's really like, a few paragraphs with one quote, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Just him saying that, he's going to follow on from Monkey Island 2, but it's not a sequel.
They keep repeating this same thing. This isn't a sequel to Monkey Island 2. The other games don't matter that much.
It's like it follows on from Monkey Island 2, but it's not a sequel to Monkey Island 2.
Yeah.
He says, while Return to Monkey Island does start right after Monkey 2 ends, it's not a sequel to Monkey 2 either. It's going to be a fun journey. It will be an e-ticket ride. I like that.
Yeah, I like that.
That intrigues me.
That's a little nod to the fans, I think, that e-ticket thing.
Yes, yeah. And who knows what that could mean. We shouldn't speculate too wildly because we'll only be disappointed.
Speculate too much. I think it just means that this is the game they wanted to make and hang the rest.
Yeah.
So in the VentureBeat one, they go a little bit more into it.
Yeah, I think this was good because Dave Grossman talked a bit more about writing the games and how he went back through and he replayed them with his son. He was already replaying them with his son, so
he's mentioned that before.
Went back and revisited them. He said, often because I was about to write dialogue for a returning character and wanted to remember their particular tone and cadence. And that was a really cool thing to read. I'm sure that's a common thing in these cases, but it shows
of course,
Dave Grossman really does want to capture what these characters were like.
The spirit of the first two games. Yeah, which is nice. I wonder if you know what I've never done is played, for example, Curse without the voices on and just with
that
the
would be
subtitles.
interesting.
I wonder if that would give it a different feel.
You know what I thought you were about to say? I thought you were about to say you'd never actually played a humongous entertainment game for some reason.
No, I have, but only demos back in the day. Well, we were a little old for them, I think.
Putt and all that.
Yeah,
Pajama Sam.
I probably would enjoy playing them. I should play them with my boys. There was one more article, of course, from the Sydney Morning Herald, our local rag.
Isn't a man alive or dead who can withstand the might of my withering barbs?
Yeah. And Ron was just talking about pixel art again. And
the pixel art thing came up. There was a nice little comparison with Sid Meier.
Yeah.
About developing games over a long... about being a developer.
Yeah, I mean, he's been involved... I don't know how much involvement he actually has with his franchises anymore, but they've been doing iterations of the same game forever. But of course, they don't mention it here, but Sid Meier, of course, made Pirates.
And Pirates Gold, which you and I spent a lot of time playing.
Yeah, and the 2000s version of Pirates was one that I played a hell of a lot. And we enjoyed that a lot. Always felt like it had a certain amount of Monkey Island influence. I don't know if it did, or if it was just they were drawing upon common imagery, maybe.
The common imagery, I think often the apprentice character looked like Guybrush.
Yeah.
Kind of bodice rippery blouse,
Yeah,
things like that.
It's sort of similar sources as well as like the main character from the Princess Bride and stuff like that. Really, isn't it?
Yeah,
Visually,
yeah. Wesley.
Yeah,
Wesley.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just been a little bit more press on the game. I imagine that.
Yeah, they're really only drip feeding it out. There have been a few tweets from Ron. Ron said that one of the main recurring characters in the series was not going to return in this game, but we don't know who.
Yeah.
My guess is the voodoo lady.
Yeah, mine as well. I think that seems to be the most likely candidate because it's all but confirmed that Elaine and LeChuck are in the game, and Murray
and Guybrush.
And the way they're talking about Stan makes it sound a lot like Stan is going to be in it.
Stan seems to be coming up a lot, yeah.
So, I mean, it could be Stan, but it seems like they're talking about someone else. So, yeah.
I won't miss the voodoo lady, I don't think.
It's not a big deal to me if they don't include any particular character. They should only include the characters that are relevant for making the game good.
Yeah. Still no release date or anything. It feels like it's going to be a long way away, but then they're probably just going to drop it on us out of nowhere at the same time, knowing Ron.
Yeah, I mean, there's only, 7 months left in the year, so...
Yeah, and they said this year. Maybe it's going to come out on the 31st of December.
I hate to be the one to break this to you, but you're stuck inside of an overgrown sea mammal.
So a few weeks ago, you and I did our first spin of the Madly Rotating Buccaneer to decide which part we were going to discuss first. It's taken us a little while to get to it.
Yeah.
But it chose for us Lair of the Leviathan, episode 3 of Tales of Monkey Island.
Yeah, which was... Of all the things it could have landed on, it landed on a chapter of Tales, the game that we know the least well.
Yeah, which is why it's taken us so long to get to it.
Because we had to go back and play the 2 preceding chapters as well to familiarise ourselves with what was actually going on.
Yeah, I didn't want to launch straight in, and I'm glad I did have kind of that refresher.
Yeah.
So I've played up until the end of Part 3. Obviously, I've played Tales of Monkey Island a couple of times before, but it's been a while, and this is definitely the game I'm least familiar with. And on replay for good reason.
Yeah, and I played past the end of 3 and have made my way a bit into Chapter 5. I played through Chapter 4 and got into Chapter 5. And
I do feel like getting to the end of the game just for the closure. But yeah, we'll get to that. So let's just talk briefly about Tales of Monkey Island. And it's a little bit of history there. It had been quite a long time since Escape had been released. That was the end of 2000.
Yeah, 9 years, right? More or less.
Yeah, this was 2009.
Yeah.
I was all excited when they announced it. I was up early and I woke you up to let you know that there was going to be a new Monkey Island game. I was that excited. You weren't that excited.
I think because it was announced after Secret Special Edition was announced, right?
No, my memory is that they were announced at exactly the same time. It was
almost the same time. I think Secret Special Edition was announced beforehand, but I could be wrong.
That's how I remember it. But also, LucasArts was still a thing. Isn't that weird?
Yeah. But this was the first time they'd done anything adventure game related since cancelling Sam & Max Freelance Police and Full Throttle Hell on Wheels, 5 years before.
Yeah.
I think Special Edition was announced before Tales, because I seem to remember thinking when they announced it, they're probably making another new game as well.
Yeah, quite possibly.
But
I remember that. I remember seeing kind of both the trailers at the same time. I was definitely more excited for Tales, even though I remember my initial impression was this looks a bit like a tech demo or something.
I think it was after Telltale Games had done Sam & Max, it seemed obvious for them to do a Monkey Island game.
Yeah, it was kind of. It felt like that was always going to come, wasn't it? Because I was a fan of the first season of Sam and Max, and they made a few other cool little things,
Yeah.
like the Bones games and Poker Night.
Yeah. And the first season of Sam and Max was okay.
Yeah, it was all right. The second season got a bit better, I think.
I really do want to go back and play them in full. I know there's been a remastering done of them recently, and I wouldn't mind giving them a proper go, but
Okay.
yeah, that's outside the scope of this podcast. But yeah, I think I remember thinking like, oh yeah, they're probably making a new one, and I think I thought like, oh, it's logical for Telltale to make it. Lots of ex-LucasArts people work for Telltale. They're the ones who are keeping the adventure game flag flying and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it was Dave. Dave was kind of the figurehead of the
Yeah,
company.
well, we knew, you know...
He was in my eyes.
Yeah, our view was that Dave Grossman was kind of this really significant figure at Telltale, and I'm not 100% sure that he actually was.
No, and I'm really not sure. He was definitely around for the press for this game and E3 and stuff.
And they, of course, also got Ron Gilbert involved with press for both the special edition of Secret and getting him in as the supposed visiting professor of monkeyology for Tales.
Yes, as he's credited. I'm really not sure. Did he have a desk in the Telltale office? Was he there one morning?
I think as we've discussed, it's probably likely that they got him in for one meeting where they threw some ideas around and he gave a few suggestions. Would be my guess.
Yeah, okay. This was a time of life for me where I had a lot of time to spend on Monkey Island forums, mainly the Telltale forum.
You were a lot more involved in that than I was.
Yeah, I've never been a massive poster, but I definitely read a lot of things about it. I posted a few things, but I kind of lived and breathed the release of this game over the 5 months it took for it to get squeezed out. It was every month, right? Am I remembering that right? Or is it...
Pretty much. It was July to December of 2009, so it would have been roughly monthly, but probably a little bit over that. But yeah, people got very excited about it. Remember those? What was his name? Marius Winter's animated "I Wonder What Happens in Tales of Monkey Island" shorts.
Yeah, that was kind of. They become kind of a tradition. And they were kind of one of the things you anticipated alongside the games.
Yeah, and in some cases were probably more clever and imaginative than what actually happened in some of the episodes. But I remember feeling optimistic about Tales when it was coming out, and certainly I remember playing it and thinking that this had kind of redeemed the series after Escape, buying in as I did to the Escape is bad theory that I was more than happy to go along with at the time, that I don't really agree with now, given that these days I think Escape is better than Tales.
Yeah, well, as we discussed a few episodes ago, Escape has possibly aged a bit better than this for various reasons. I think we'll probably go into detail over a whole Tale kind of retrospection.
Yeah.
But I guess at the moment we're here to discuss
Lair of the Leviathan specifically, yeah.
Beware my clicking mandibles of doom!
We're jumping into the middle of
right into the middle
Tales,
of Tales.
Chapter 3, where Guybrush has accidentally unleashed the pox of LeChuck on the Caribbean, and the only way to cure it is supposedly using La Esponja Grande, the big sponge that the voodoo lady told him about, and he goes to... he uses these ancient Vacalian summoning artifacts that he finds in the previous chapter to take him and his ship to the part of the ocean where he gets swallowed by a giant manatee. and the majority of Chapter 3, Lair of the Leviathan, is set inside the stomach of the manatee.
Yes, which is a big Jonah and the Whale / Pinocchio kind of idea.
Yeah, and right? Can I also mention as well, just to say again, my Tales of Monkey Island is a weird, misguided parody of the Legend of Zelda theory, because this is also very evocative of the Jabba Jabba's Belly dungeon from Ocarina of Time, in which you go inside the stomach of a giant fish. Obviously, again, similar inspirations from folklore and mythology and that kind of thing, but I don't know, there's so much stuff in these games that I feel like someone was like, it'd be hilarious if we parodied Zelda in this Monkey Island game for some reason. I really hope that's not true. That's pretty gross. Feel like someone was thinking that.
Yeah, because Zelda, surely that series has possibly drawn some inspiration from the adventure game of the 90s.
I would have thought so to a certain extent, and it does feel like it's a bit like Monkey Combat. If there's a genuine link between Tales of Monkey Island and Zelda, I feel like it's some kind of really inward-looking video game culture parody thing that doesn't work. So I do hope that the Zelda thing is just me and it's not a real parody, but I just can't shake the feeling.
Hope so too. We should find some jaded ex-Telltale employee and ask them. So your Guybrush is on the shipwreck, just like Geppetto is in the belly of the Leviathan. He's with Morgan Le Fay. What's a Morgan Le Fay?
It's what you oughtn't to do, but you do anyway.
I guess if we start off with the opening of the game, this whole section where you meet DeCarver, God, this thing with the quiz about Morgan is so strange.
It's weird, especially the first part. You need to. Van Winslow's teaching you how to revive her, and it feels like a puzzle that's not a puzzle. And I said to you, it's like a puzzle from a children's game or something, where he just tells you what to do and you just do it. Yeah. It's like a basic comprehension kind of thing, and then you have to. Once you're in the cage, you have the option to go back and remember what Guybrush noticed.
And use those to answer the questions. Yeah, I don't mind them doing something different, but to me, this puzzle feels a bit off, because I think one of the biggest things about it is this whole thing of remembering things she said and stuff. It's so outside of the usual, like, LucasArts adventure game experience. Like, normally you'd have to, write something down, or there'd be some kind of trick to it or something like that, but
there'd be a trick to it, or you wouldn't necessarily be caged. You'd have to go and talk to her, or you'd have to gather clues or something.
And you'd have to BS your way through it. That's just the premise for the puzzle, and the puzzle itself is just you rattling off facts about Morgan and figuring out how to associate the correct clue with the correct question. So I think it's a bit like, if the puzzle doesn't work, you need to rethink the story. I think needs to be that goes to what I wanted to say about this opening. Is you meet Coronado DeCarver, and he's just this complete lunatic who is jealous about your possible relationship with the voodoo lady, and thinks his crew have died by falling into the guts of the manatee, and is trying to build a giant mechanical inner ear for the creature, and it's so over the top. and one of my notes here is DeCarver should be more mad. Oh, you think he's not actually mad enough? Well, he's unhinged, but at the same time, he's kind of
intelligent enough and is lucid enough to make decisions, and eventually at the end of this part just kind of function. But I kind of feels like if he'd been a bit more insane and, you know, talking to himself and thinking and paranoid, you know, he's meant to have been trapped inside this thing for a long time.
Yeah.
And he would be crazy. I like the idea of a person that's been trapped inside kind of the belly of this creature, but he still seems, I don't know, he's more silly than he is.
Yeah. I think the whole thing of being inside the manatee is similar to the mermaids in part 2. It feels so strange in a Monkey Island game, and it's again to say, like, no, they shouldn't feel like you have to do what came before, or you shouldn't try something because it's not commonplace in the series. But this sort of mythological element in Tales feels a lot more like something from a fantasy game to me than it feels like something from Monkey Island, with its kind of more focus on consumerism and
being kind of a
and kind of commercialization of ideas and imagination and stuff like that.
The things I've thought about here is that I would like the idea, at the end of this part, you're in a kind of a graveyard for these giant sea leviathans, and I kind of thought, wouldn't it be cool if all you found were these bones, and they weren't necessarily some kind of funny sea creature, or they could be. Maybe Guybrush could say, it could be a giant manatee. But instead of actually seeing them, all you saw were these massive bones, and that was kind of really creepy. And this is kind of a thing I thought about with the mermaid episode before this, was like, couldn't we have a hint that maybe these mer people either kind of have left this civilization behind, or there's been this civilization that's worshipped mer people or something, that there are hints of these things. And I kind of draw a comparison with Atlantis, in Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, where you encounter these creatures that you kind of later find out have been these experiments to turn people into higher beings. But it's never really explained, and it's kind of just, that makes it so much more creepy and atmospheric by just having these bones and this civilization that's fallen apart, and, you know, experiencing things like that. And maybe the pirate characters, there are other pirate characters there exploring or looking for secrets and things in these areas, but we don't necessarily have to have these overt things like the giant manatee and, you know, the mer
the weird seahorses. They don't necessarily like that.
Yeah, they don't necessarily gel with kind of the whole idea of Monkey Island.
Have this idea that potentially there's something weird going on under the surface, but you don't see what it is, rather than just being like, haha, big manatees. Manatees are funny. We had a mechanical manatee in Escape from Monkey Island, and that was funny. So we're going to have even more manatees. Yeah, okay. So you eventually solve this puzzle hanging over the pit, and you fall into the belly, and that's when we get this is part 3, and we get the nice music. Yeah, and it should be noted that each one of these episodes of Tales is structured in a similar way. I made some notes about this. They're pretty much, they all follow this rigid structure. There's a tutorial puzzle or two at the beginning. Then there's a main puzzle section with usually 3 main goals. There's a kind of follow-up puzzle after that, a single puzzle section. And then there'll be an epilogue of some kind with limited interaction options to round out the episode. And I'm fairly sure, again, I haven't finished replaying Chapter 5, but I'm fairly sure that they all more or less follow this pattern. And
they have so far up to this point. And this kind of makes me think about the episodic format of this kind of game, where each part needs to be a certain length in order to give you
Yeah.
bang for your buck. Whereas we don't get, say in Curse, part 1 is really short and acts as a tutorial on how to play the game,
Yeah.
really. And then part 2 is much, much longer. And we don't kind of get that flow to the storytelling in this way. We get all the cliffhangers at the end of each part, but we don't. Every part has to be a specific length, or you need to feel like you've spent enough time. They're all 2.5 hours of gameplay or something like that.
And the story feels very beholden to the need to follow that structure.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's
Not
it's
for the
like
better.
what's the obstacle of the week that Guybrush has to overcome in order to achieve his goal, and some of them are more plot directed than others. I think this one's not a great example because basically it's that Guybrush has to bluff his way into becoming a member of Takava's crew, or the sort of fraternity that the crew members have developed inside the Manatee, so that he can get access to the inner ear, the true inner ear of the Manatee that's been removed.
Yeah, which is kind of brutal.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it's not like the stuff that Guybrush does to become a member of the democratically whatever order of the Manatee interior isn't in service of the plot of finding La Esponja Grande. It's just like these are the 3 obstacles in Guybrush's way that he has to get through before he can get the sponge.
That was another point I was going to make in this episodic kind of thing, where rather than having the story flow and the puzzles being part of the flow of the story, these puzzles are just obstacles to be overcome in order to unlock the next part. And like that, I found, especially in this part, that quite frustrating, dealing with these crew members and dealing with Takava as well.
Yeah.
There's one puzzle I got particularly stuck on, and I just thought, why has this become such a puzzle? This should just be a simple solution in order for me to move on with the plot.
Yeah. So, what puzzle was that?
That was. We'll get to it, but it was you had to give Takava the yellow drink, but he didn't want to drink the yellow drink. He wanted to drink the orange drink.
Took me a bit of stumbling around before I finished that one as well.
Yeah, I got kind of frustrated figuring that out. So you end up in the belly of the beast, and you're there with Morgan. Morgan wants you to help get out. Morgan wants you to figure out how to get out. And Guybrush tells Morgan that he's just going to go and talk to everyone because he's an adventure game character, and that's what you do.
Yeah, there's a lot of self-awareness about what adventure game characters do in this, especially with...
It's not the first time this has happened. There's a big part in talking to LeChuck in the last part where he kind of does the same thing. There's a whole puzzle based around this idea that they all exist in an adventure game.
You're giving, and you give LeChuck adventure game character style instructions. I think... Oh man, there's just so much to... It's like, where do you even begin talking about this? Like...
Well, my main point about this is just going around and gathering information, having to just step through every line of dialogue in order to know everything is a pain, and it's boring, and these characters are a little underwritten and uninteresting.
Yeah, and I think that's a strong criticism of Tales, is the fact that, there's a lot of long conversations that you have to get through, with characters who aren't particularly well developed or aren't particularly funny even. Like...
No, they're kind of... they're silly, but they're not necessarily funny.
Yeah.
And you need to make sure you've stepped through every line of dialogue, because if you didn't step through everything, you may have missed an item that one of them was supposed to give you.
Or you may not trigger some event or something like that.
Event.
And
So it feels less like an adventure game than just covering all your bases. Exploring absolutely every option.
Yeah, and I found with it that there was a certain extent to which I was, just going, all right, I'm going to sweep this environment. I'll go talk to Moose. I'll run through every dialogue option with Moose. Go talk to Noogie. Run through every dialogue option with Noogie. Go talk to Bug-Eye.
Talk to Bug-Eye. Do it all. And then you eventually find Murray, who was actually funny in this.
Yeah, as I said before, I think
surprised.
Murray's used well. He is used in a weird way that feels a little bit, again, too self-aware about the joke about Murray. It's like
true, but he is genuinely funny as well.
Yeah, and Denny Delk obviously gives a really strong performance as always,
absolutely,
which is, makes a
really
huge difference. I think
this
is like another really common criticism of Tales is that there are these two pirate character models that just get used over and over and over again. And I'm pretty sure Moose and Bug-Eye are both variations on the tall, skinny pirate character model. And then you've got Noogie, who's the short, fat one, which Winslow also is. I think it's really lazy that Winslow, who's a relatively important supporting character, doesn't get his own character model.
Yeah. Well, as we've discussed, I believe this is to keep file sizes low for the
and to save time and cost on development as well. I believe, from what I've read. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got a note here, and it is kind of worth bringing up, is that the whole meat of this part is getting voted into this Brotherhood thing, and it's very reminiscent of the diving contest in Escape, which is a kind of another pain in the butt puzzle.
Where you have to bribe or otherwise BS these three judges into giving you the correct score, the top score in the diving contest.
So you need to convince Moose that his friend Santino, who is dead, is going to vote for you. You do that by replacing Santino's head with Murray, and then giving Murray a book that says that if he does vote for you, he's going to torture Guybrush. That appeals to his evil sensibilities. You have to get...
Noogie wants to go on a date with Morgan.
A date with Morgan.
So you have to convince Morgan that he's dangerous. And...
and then you have to do this face-pulling contest.
Really strange thing with Bug-Eye about pulling weird faces at each other.
So I don't know what to talk about first, or if this really needs to be discussed. The Bug-Eye thing, you have to go around and just gather faces from everywhere. Some of which come from the people around the environment. Others are from a painting, from a figurehead. You need to do that puzzle we mentioned before, where you give DeCarver the wrong drink, which makes his eyes go funny.
Yeah.
And then all you have to do is not repeat the faces that Bug-Eye pulls.
Yeah.
And then that's it. And then Guybrush gets affected by the pox of LeChuck, which Moose thinks is some crazy face that he's pulling. Is the pox of LeChuck thing good? I don't think it's good.
No, I don't like the pox of LeChuck as a plot device at all. I think it's that thing that I've said before. I don't like Guybrush Saves the World as the story of Monkey Island. I think it doesn't gel well with his character overall.
No, Guybrush seems completely different, especially in this story. That is definitely, as we've mentioned before, this is kind of an extension of Guybrush's character in Tales.
Yeah, Escape, you mean? And it's worth mentioning that there was writing done on Tales by Mike Stemley, who was one of the lead developers of Escape as well. So there's some pretty clear continuity in terms of writing style between Escape and Tales. I think you've got really dumb, goofy Guybrush. The thing that really grates on my nerves with Tales is the gotta have a joke or even feeble alliteration in every line, in the idea that will somehow make it funny, which starts to get really wearing after a while, I find the writing in Tales to be quite tedious at points in its desperate efforts to put some kind of joke or punning element into every single line, and it's like sometimes you just want the characters to talk like real people, which was often what was so funny about the... Yeah, exactly. They feel like pantomime characters, at times, because the way they talk, and they don't feel realistic.
It undermines any character drama here. So there's meant to be this kind of underlying possible romantic tension between Morgan and Guybrush, and it kind of comes out towards the end of this episode. But because it's been treated in such a ridiculous fashion, and every character is just spouting one-liners from kind of a poor American sitcom, you can't buy into this stuff. There's no poignancy.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about Morgan in a bit of detail, because this is one of the episodes that she's in the most and where you interact with her the most. Morgan was obviously one of the big new characters that was introduced for this game alongside Mucky Desange, who's probably the only other really significant character who's introduced, I think, who plays a particularly significant role in the plot. And it feels to me with Morgan that they wanted to give Guybrush this new friend, rival, sparring partner, possibly sort of someone to have romantic tension with and stuff, because, again, like we were talking about last week, because like they didn't know what to do with Elaine, and they wanted to have some kind of back and forth in the game, so they introduced this new character to do it. And at times I find myself just thinking, why am I spending all this time with this new character when we have these existing characters that they seem to want to include, but then only use in it's like why bother having Elaine in the game at all if you're just going to have her constantly be pushed out of the main story?
That's the thing. It feels like first draft kind of stuff, doesn't it? They've come up with an idea and we've got to develop something, so let's do that. Morgan's not a particularly interesting character. She kind of reminds me in a way of Kylo Ren, wherein she is a fan of Guybrush and she loses her faith in him, but who cares?
I think it's like, what's the point of the character? Why do we care about Morgan? Like, I don't dislike Morgan as a character. I don't think Morgan's a bad idea for a character in a game that isn't Monkey Island. Like, her relationship with Guybrush just feels weird. It feels off. Like the idea that Guybrush is this famous pirate, but Guybrush's fame in other games was always tinged with a sense of artificiality to it, like when no one believes in Monkey Island 2, or with Planet 3 would even in this game.
Yeah, he wants to be famous, but he's not that kind of idea.
Yeah.
I think about Monkey Island 2, Largo is meant to be pursuing Guybrush, but he's never seen. You know what I mean? I mean, it would be okay if you occasionally, you left a scene and then there was a cut scene of Largo turning up and, I just missed him kind of thing. Like, maybe if Morgan was that kind of character.
I think they just wanted to, develop some kind of cast of secondary characters that they wanted to have these, complex, more complex relationships with. But because everything's so ridiculous, it's just hard to take any of it seriously. But it feels like they want us to take it seriously.
Yeah, I think so. And we see Elaine and LeChuck, there's this kind of idea of a romantic thing there as well, but I can't take that seriously.
One of the things I think that the other games always did well is... And I was talking about this last week, there was always this sense of distance between Guybrush and the other characters.
Yeah.
where you felt a bit like Guybrush was a little bit alone in this strange world. I think of Curse in particular having a very solitary mood a lot of the time, and having these...
I think the first 3 games, apart from kind of Captain Dread, has that kind of feel.
Or even characters, supporting
Or
characters
the
like
crew.
Wally or something, you don't have these, like... there's not some kind of intentionally fleshed out relationship between, like, Guybrush and Wally, or between Guybrush and, like, his crew in Secret or in Curse, you know?
Or even Escape.
Yeah, exactly. In Escape, they all just ditch you as soon as you get to any island, and if you try to talk to them, they just are upset with you and want you to leave them alone.
That's right. I like that in Curse as well. You know, they take you there, they take you to Blood Island, and then they decide that it's not for them and they want to leave. Yeah, you can still talk to them. But that's it.
Yeah. And I think having this ongoing kind of development of this relationship between Guybrush and Morgan, it feels out of place in the game.
Yeah, it feels like there isn't any point to it. It's just kind of this on and off again character that's just there for no reason. A bit like Mac in Indiana Jones: The King of the Crystal Skull.
Yeah.
It's kind of just a pointless character.
You sort of wonder if someone thought it was the character was a good idea, and then they kind of stuck with it, even though it wasn't necessarily working, sort of thing.
Yeah, you didn't need that character anymore.
Again, I think Morgan would work in a different game. Like, there wasn't...
Maybe in a different game, or if this game didn't have Elaine in it.
Yeah. Because it's almost like, why not just have Elaine in Morgan's role? Like, I guess the whole point of Morgan is, like, she's getting him back to... Like, plot-wise, is she's getting him back to Desange. But, like, if we forget about that, because that's just the structure of the plot, and it's not that important.
No.
You may as well just have Elaine, but it felt like they didn't know how to write Elaine in this, because she is, as you said last week, just like the long-suffering wife of the goofy husband trope.
Yeah. It's not great in the last 2 games.
No.
Well, getting back to the game.
Yeah, focusing on Lair of the Leviathan, I did want to say... I don't hate the idea of, like, Guybrush trying to join this, like, fraternal society. I think, like, at its core, that idea is not bad. I think that's a, like... And again, that makes me feel like this is the kind of thing that would work better in, like, Grim Fandango or something like that. You know, it's like, Manny needs to join this exclusive club so he can find out about the secrets of who's stealing all the tickets to the underworld or whatever, you know.
Yeah, like, exactly. Or that, joining the underground.
Yeah, where it feels like that would be part of the world in which it took place, whereas this is more just like a gag that, like, isn't it funny that these 3 dudes marooned inside a manatee have formed a kind of
this fraternity.
this secret society kind of thing.
Yeah, and all they do is hang out in there. The environment is very kind of limited. You don't see.
This is tiny.
Tales. Yeah, you never see where anyone sleeps or
no.
Like, these are kind of details that were in the first few games.
Yeah, there's definitely not a sense of wider space to what...
No. I don't feel like these characters have been trapped inside a whale or whatever for 10 years. Because they're all so silly. I want to talk about the puzzle where you have to get Morgan to go on a date. Well, Morgan thinks she's interrogating Noogie, and Noogie thinks he's on a date. But this is a trial and error style puzzle.
Because you don't know off the top of your head which order is the correct one.
No, and like, that's frustrating and boring to me. I kind of like the idea of the puzzle, but I feel like you should be able to ask Noogie what he likes or what he's into,
exactly.
and then kind of translate that into your instructions to Morgan, which, you know, all he says is like, oh, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
She did this and I didn't like it, so you just have to try something else.
Yeah.
The trial and error of the nature of that is not good.
Yeah.
I don't think.
And I think it's a bit like at the start of the Bug Eye puzzle, it's like Bug Eye pulls his face, and then you've only got the option to lose by pulling the wrong faces. It's like, no, introduce me to the concept of this face pulling contest before I have to spend time using expressions that I already know aren't going to work and have the characters all give me grief for not being original when I don't. It's like, yeah, I know I don't have the moves that I need. Like, let me just get on with it. It's kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. There's no learnt portion to this. It's not like in sword fighting or even monkey combat to that extent.
Yeah. I think the puzzle with Murray is probably the best one of the three.
It's the most kind of traditional, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I like having to convince him that by torturing you, even though that seems so hackneyed that there just happens to be these two books that you can swap the covers for.
Yeah, I'd completely forgotten about that puzzle. And
all I remembered was that Murray was in this. That's the other thing. This game has not stuck with me. Like, I feel like I'm playing this for the first time. There are a few little bits and pieces I remember, but yeah, I've had to figure all of this out from scratch again.
Yeah, and I replayed it back in 2015, and nothing had stuck with me.
I didn't realise you played it that recently.
Yeah. And I thought there's some really weird stuff in the game. Like, if you hit, you can distract Moose so that you can attack Santino with your sword, but it does nothing, and there's no reason why that's an option, because you just swap Murray's head with Santino's, and Guybrush just distracts Moose for you. You don't have to interact with Moose to do it. And which is really odd. I was like, oh, clearly I'm going to have to talk to Moose, then cut off Santino's head with a sword, and then put Murray on Santino's neck. No, you just swap Murray for Santino's skull, and then it's done.
Yeah, I feel like that should be it's the puzzle. And once you're voted into the fraternity, you have to go up. And what happens next?
Well, you go and get the cochlea, but I found that so weird because Bug Eye's like, we can't let him in because he obviously just wants to steal the cochlea. But then when you get let in, they're like, oh, okay, your first responsibility is to look after the cochlea, and you're allowed to just walk off and get it and put it back in the manatee's ear. And there's no, like, Bug Eye doesn't try to stop you, even though his whole thing throughout this is obviously like, he doesn't want you to join, and he doesn't want the manatee to ever reach its destination. Did you? Yeah. I will say, I didn't hate Bug Eye as a character. Like, I thought, I like the idea of him as like, he's this tough guy who's obviously like abusing his position of leadership within this supposedly equal group. But then as soon as they're reunited with Dakava, he immediately caves and just becomes completely goes back to just becomes completely servile to whatever Dakava wants him to do, which I don't dislike. And I think the voice acting for Bug Eye is quite good as well. But it just needs to be in a different context, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I didn't mind Bug Eye. I think I found the bit where he swallows his eyeball funny.
Yeah. I think Moose, like, Noogie's just a complete nothing, generic nerd character, which is pretty boring. And Moose, there's the like frat guy. character is... again, it feels like that they've just thrown different ideas together here. Like, I get that vaguely this is meant to be like a college fraternity or something with the jock and the nerd and the like party guy.
Yeah.
But it's so just thrown in without any particular seeming like regard for how like the comedy of that situation would inform the broader like humor of the part. It's just like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if they were like frat guys in a manatee?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. And when you say it like that, it does sound funny, but the execution's not all there, especially when this kind of feels like the meat of this part, and the surrounding parts, the first part, and the bit outside the Leviathan kind of feels secondary to it. Or maybe it's just because it took me this long. This was the longest bit for me to figure out.
Yeah.
Is this
I mean, I think this is the... I think it is the main part of the game. It's also... Though it feels like once you get to the end of this, you're like, oh, thank God that's over. And then you have to do all the crap with the manatee mating calls or whatever later on.
Yeah, we may as well move on to talk about that then. So you sell out the crew.
Yeah, you have to scare Noogie into telling you that Moose has the means of talking to the manatee, right? Because it's the like horn thing that he's been drinking, like manatee bile or like manatee ichor. With his like beer bong thing. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, if this was an older Monkey Island game, it would just be a beer bong. It wouldn't be exactly. Like a shell that like, haha, he's using it like a beer bong. It would literally just be a beer bong.
Yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, we don't have those anachronistic things really, even though they're kind of the more wacky things in the first few games. Yeah. But in this, we've got wacky characters instead.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what it feels like. And I'm not saying like Monkey Island doesn't have to have anachronisms or something for the sake of it. Like, that's arguably something that Curse and Escape do that at times feels a little bit artificial. But it sort of... Again, it goes back to this thing of like, it feels more like a fantasy parody than what Monkey Island sort of normally does, and as such, it feels a bit weaker for being a parody of something a bit more like a more common thing to make fun of, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. In one of those articles that we just discussed today, Ron said that he felt like Monkey Island was an opportunity to parody things.
Yeah.
But it felt like maybe it was just done with a bit more finesse originally, and that they were a bit more choosy about the things that they parodied.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, so this kind of latter section of the game contains some of my favourite puzzles from this part.
Mm-hmm.
There's a puzzle where you need to take a photo of Guybrush and use it on a locket, and that means you're able to inhabit the body of the voodoo lady. And my favourite puzzle then is this puzzle where you move tarot cards around in order to do various actions. It's kind of slight in its design, and there are only so many combinations of things you can do. I think it's more if it had been expanded into having a lot more options and a lot more opportunity for comedy and consequences, it would have been a really great puzzle, this kind of idea of moving around tarot cards in order to control people's actions.
Yeah, I don't quite understand how some of the orders work. I feel like I just brute forced my way through that because, as you say, there are only so many combinations, but it's a bit like the face pulling thing. As much as the face pulling in itself I don't think is a terribly interesting concept, it feels like this is a more complex system that only gets used for one kind of throwaway puzzle, basically.
Yeah, I feel like using this tarot card puzzle, maybe if it had been developed further, would have been better a better puzzle to come back to throughout the series. Maybe you have to substitute things that aren't actually tarot cards, so that Guybrush has to inhabit the body of something else or someone else that he finds a photograph of or something. Maybe that kind of would have been a better repetitive puzzle than, say, wandering around jungles. Lost.
Which you do again in chapter
randomised
4.
jungles. Oh, great! I'm looking forward to that then. So and you have to communicate with the Marquis in order to learn about how to talk to the manatee. And actually, I did like the puzzle where you have to talk for the manatee in order to seduce the aggressive female manatee.
The one thing that annoyed me was it was like, oh, suddenly I've got this whole thing of manatee phrases that I haven't been given a chance to get my head around what they are, and you're like given this huge amount of options. Again, that's obviously like intended to make the puzzle harder. But to me, it was like, oh god, there's been no introduction to this, and it's as opposed to the face pulling thing where it's like, yeah, I know what I have to do. In this, it's like, whoa, hang on. I've got to figure out, I've got to look through this whole list of things, think about how each one might work, and then if I get it wrong, I've got to go back and restart the puzzle, you know?
That's it. It's like there's no learning element. At least you get a few chances. It kind of reminds me very much of Insult Arm Wrestling in Escape. Where it's just like you're presented with these options and you just have to pick the right combinations. Yeah. But at least it's funny. There's a joke that actually made me laugh. Guybrush keeps saying, "This is satisfactory," because that's all he knows how to say. I thought that was quite funny. In order to say, because he doesn't know how to say yes or okay.
Which I think is based on real experiences that people have had when they are in a foreign country and can't remember how to say specific commonplace words. So they end up saying something more complex that they can remember how to say.
Joke. Yeah, it's kind of a famous Monty Python sketch. Around that idea.
And there were, and speaking of things that make you laugh, there were definitely stuff that amused me throughout the chapter, but just nothing really that stands out particularly strongly.
No, I guess this puzzle and the one with the tarot cards are probably the ones that I enjoyed the most, just because they were a bit different, maybe.
Yeah, I felt it, for me, the sort of last act of the game drags a bit, because I felt like once I'd gotten the cochlea, I'm like, okay, can't I just go get the sponge? And I'm like, oh, now I've got to do all this other stuffing around.
This fierce naval combat.
Oh, God, and the last puzzle I found, I couldn't figure out what to do in the final puzzle for this chapter or for chapter 1 until Guybrush gave the hint, because I was just stumbling around being like, oh god, what am I meant to do here? Because
what's the final puzzle in this?
You got to stand near the mast so that the cannonball bounces back and destroys Bug Eye's cannon, and then when Bug Eye's fetching another cannon, you throw the seahorse head at the ship, or you shoot it out of the cannon. But I felt like with this, it was one of those things where I kept opening my inventory and being like, okay, what do I still have? I got the fake jewelry, the seahorse head, and the manatee like summoning trumpet thing. And I was like, oh, I've got to go and summon the manatee again. Use the trumpet on the other ship, and Guybrush goes, oh, that's a good idea, but I have to be underwater to summon the manatee. Try to go and jump off the plank. Oh, Bug Eye has shot me. Okay, I'll stand near the mast. Bug Eye went away. I've got to jump in the water. Guybrush says, oh, I can't do that. I can't abandon Morgan. Okay, I'll go talk to Morgan. Yeah. How do I set you free? Oh, don't worry about it. And I'm like, okay, so there's this huge chain of things leading me back to actually telling me that I've got the wrong end of the stick. But I'm like, why is there all this stuff in there? Why does Guybrush not just go, oh, that won't work, when I try to use the summoning horn thing? And I think the other thing was it needed to show everything. Show you shooting something else out of the cannon to set up the idea of putting the seahorse head in the cannon. For me, I was...
Maybe if the crew were firing cutlery or something because they were out of cannonballs or...
Something like that,
some sort of clue. I think this is a common thing, and it has been throughout all of the LucasArts Adventure games. It's how to have an action sequence in a game like this, and So, like, Tales of Monkey Island itself opens with this kind of silly action sequence like this at the beginning of Launch of the Screaming Narwhal on the ship with LeChuck and Elaine. Think of the action sequence. Have you finished Full Throttle at the end of Full Throttle?
I haven't finished it, but I know vaguely what happens at the end.
Okay, yes. Like, things like that where, like, you need to feel like there's a time limit and that you're under pressure and that, there's some action going, but actually it's just the same repetitive thing over and over again. And I think if you need to have a puzzle like this, you need to try again and write something that doesn't need that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't have these action sequences in the first few games. Kind of the most pulse quickening sequence is probably in The Secret of Monkey Island, where you have to transfer the grog from mug to mug as you walk through the town. But even then, it's pretty generous.
Bit of timing involved in using the root beer on LeChuck as well, I guess.
Yeah, that too. And I suppose at the end of the Chuck's Revenge, where you have to use the voodoo doll.
Yeah. To me, the other thing that feels a bit tedious about this is it's so similar. It's just a sort of remix of the puzzle with McGillicuddy from the end of Chapter 2 of Tales. And being forced to solve a puzzle on the ship is the same thing in Chapter 1 as well. So it's like, I'm back on the ship. I'm back in a thing where I only have one thing clearly that I can do that will end the game.
Yeah. There's no explorative nature to these puzzles.
And the hint as well was Guybrush goes, this seahorse head in my pocket really smells. And I was like, oh, okay. I just have to throw the seahorse head of the ship or launch out the cannon. And it wasn't him being like, I've got to figure out a way to, to stop them without using the cannon or something. I don't know. Like, it wasn't... Or, I don't know.
But your options are so limited at that point.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, it was just, too... It was too... I don't know, I just couldn't get into that adventure game developer's mindset in that moment. Maybe, and it was the only thing I really had trouble with. But yeah, but that does remind me we wanted to talk about DeCarver's monocular. Yeah,
okay, so that was a puzzle I got stuck on. So it's very similar to Wally putting down his monocle and then you steal it in LeChuck's Revenge. I couldn't figure this out. I mean, I did eventually, just figured it out, but it took me a long time. He puts down his, what's it called, a monocular?
Yeah, that's what they call it in the game.
Yeah, and you have to pick it up and replace it with the
fisheye of the manatee.
Red tinged, yeah. I don't know, for some reason I couldn't figure that out. It took me a long time. It didn't feel particularly satisfying when I did figure it out. I think often these puzzles, they feel a bit... Like, if you can't... I need a clue that means the way Guybrush is kind of saying, this is a good idea, but I need to execute it in a different way.
Yeah, I felt with that, there'd been nothing had drawn attention to the fact that DeCarver was using this special eyepiece the whole time.
Yeah, or the fact that he puts it down.
Yeah, there's nothing to draw attention to that. Whereas in LeChuck's Revenge, for example, Wally so prominently puts his monocle down, rubs his eyes.
Yeah, rubs his eyes.
This very small model of the 3D model of the monocular gets put down. You don't even know that it's something you can interact with. And DeCarver never goes, I've created this, genius invention which allows me to study my designs in precise detail or something like that. You just think it's part of his character model or costume or something like that.
Yeah, I did, and that's why it took me so long to figure out. Another thing with Walt stealing Wally's monocle is that it's funny. It's Guybrush screwing him over. I figured out that you could pick that up before I realised that I needed to use it. You know what I mean? And then Wally's there going, I can't see, I'm blind. This doesn't have that same kind of bearing on this story.
It's just Dakava wants a drink, and you have to give him the drink he doesn't want, so he'll pull a funny face.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of stupid things, the crew, Dakava's crew, forget the sponge and they just leave it on Guybrush's ship. That just seems so dumb.
It feels like they were rushing to get the story to an end, to me.
Yeah. Well, they'd kind of written themselves into this corner and then been like, oh, we need to have this action sequence for whatever reason. How do we get the sponge back? Oh, they just drop it. You know, that needed a rewrite, or to not happen altogether, or maybe that action sequence was actually about getting the sponge back.
Yes, exactly.
You know,
rather than just
maybe it's
blowing
kind
up
of Raiders of the Lost Ark scenario where the artifact keeps going back and forth for some reason. Yeah. Okay. I wanted to mention music.
Yeah.
There are two pieces of music I have note that I wanted to mention. The first is the diving theme makes a return.
Kate Capsize's theme.
Kate Capsize's theme, which we use as the music to this podcast. Also, I like the music inside the narwhal,
the manatee
section where. Sorry, I want to keep saying narwhal. Inside the manatee, where Dakava is. And where the screaming narwhal is, it's kind of this low-key kind of music that does make you feel kind of isolated and insulated against the rest of the world. I think it's quite a nice little piece.
Yeah.
Did you not have any music of note?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, the music's all fine. I don't find the music terribly memorable in Tales in general most of the time.
I don't think there are any new strong themes.
No, I think maybe there's a bit of ambient music that's used in chapter 4 that kind of sticks out in my memory a little bit when you're wandering around town, but I
assume does Stan's theme make a
reappearance? It does when you're talking to him in chapter 4.
I would have thought so. I think, is this the second time Kate's theme has been used in Tales?
No, but Guybrush whistles Largo's theme in chapter 2 for no reason.
Kate's theme is used. It's kind of used as the travelling downwards theme when Guybrush is falling down the cliff in Curse. Yeah, I didn't have too much more to say about this.
No, it all feels a bit inconsequential, really.
Yeah, it feels like a bit of a pause in the whole adventure. Not that I've even enjoyed the adventure that much up to this point. I'm trying to think. I guess I've said a few things that were positive. I'm trying to think to finish on a positive or to wrap it up into a nice little package.
Yeah, as I say, there's a few bits that amused me. I think Bug-Eye is an okay character. I even think Moose would work better in a different kind of setting.
Maybe if he was actually drinking
I will say the floating tourist signs for the manatee mating grounds feel very much like something out of Secret, which I like.
Yeah, kind of Hook Island kind of thing. Yeah, I did like that. And I liked a few of the puzzles, especially towards the end of the game.
Yeah.
But overall, it felt like another Tales chapter.
Yep.
How did it compare to the two before it, the two that I've played?
I think it's better, probably.
I think it's better than part 2. I'm not sure about. I really don't know. They're all kind of. This one doesn't have any wandering around the randomized jungle,
which is a plus.
Puzzles.
Yeah,
it's a plus. So in conclusion, it's something that existed in order to move.
I think I think it's very of its time. This was the era when people were making these attempts, Telltale, to some financial success before they went completely bust, to do episodic gaming, but it also shows the limitations of episodic gaming pretty clearly, and it also shows the limitations of writing and developing a game to a really tight deadline. And I think when something is being probably written and developed and designed by people who don't have a terribly strong idea of what made the concept interesting in the first place, and are just
I think you're right.
funny pirate game where funny nautical mayhem happens.
Yeah, funny things will happen. There will be funny lines of
humour
dialogue.
at sea.
Yeah. In a very apt way of putting it. With that, we'll
Draw this to a close,
draw
and
this to a close.
I think time for another spin of the
Yeah,
Madly
let's do
Rotating
that.
Buccaneer.
Let's go ride the Madly Rotating Buccaneer.
Yeah, the Madly Rotating Buccaneer, we're members of the Gamblers Cart Club. We're going to choose another part to discuss next time. We're going to play it in the coming week, hopefully. If we don't like our original spin, we can get another chance if we choose to do that. So before we begin, lock in your bet. What would you like to be playing?
Chapter 2, The Journey. Why not?
That's what I was going
Well,
to say.
there you go.
Alright, I'll have another...
No. Why can't we
that's
both
all
have
right.
a
I'm going to say... No, I'm going to say the demise of the zombie pirate
enough.
ninja. Alright, so let's spin the wheel. Okay, you ready?
Yep.
The results are in, and I think you're going to like it.
Yep.
The Largo embargo.
Cool.
I think we'll stick with that.
Yep, let's do it.
Yeah. I like playing LeChuck's Revenge.
Me too.
Yeah. Alright, well that brings us to the end of another episode of Rubber Chicken.
Rubber Chicken.
Rubber Chicken podcast in the middle. Thank you for listening. I've been Gordon.
I'm Alistair.
And...
Look behind you! A three-headed monkey!